Hey, I'm Dragon. In today's quick tutorial, or what was going to be a quick tutorial, we will be making
the ring to rule them all
with Blender. I'll be showing you how to both shade it and make it a 3D printable version. By the way, I didn't realize this until after I'd recorded it all, but CG Matter / Default Cube had actually made one and it happens to be very similar. Just thought that needed to be said. Otherwise, let's jump into the tutorial. To start, let's add a cylinder, hop into edit mode, and add a loop cut and scale outwards. Then delete the top and bottom faces. Now we need a text that will be wrapping around the ring. So go to Google and find a good image. Just make sure it's only one line thick. Then, in the shader editor, open that image, then go to UV editing, mark seam, and unwrap. As you can see, the unwrap isn't straight, so you can hit S to scale, then hit X or Y to go along the X or Y axis, and Z to flatten. You need to do this 3 times to make all the vertices flat, but once this is done, you can then rotate, scale, and move the vertices to get the text where you want. From there, we can delete the principal BSDF and replace it with a glossy shader. Then choose a goldish color for the ring, and decrease the roughness. Then shade this ring smooth, and at this point we can also add subdivision to make it even more smooth. Now extrude inward by extruding along normals. The hotkey is Option E. Now add a displacement node and plug the text into the height of the displacement. And it's not coming outward, it's indented. Also, we need a glow. So to fix the weird displacement, we can add a color ramp and move the black and white. Personally, I still like it coming out, so I duplicate all of it, and if I want to, I can use it later. Then I add an invert node before the color ramp, and I get indenting. You can also see we need to play around with the color ramp again because it's completely different, but that's fine because it allows you to get the indent how you want it. Now let's add a mix shader and an emission shader. You can see this doesn't get the glow where we want, it kind of just applies a weird glow to the entire thing, so we can add a color ramp and plug it into the factor, along with plugging the invert node into the color ramp. This allows you to control how much the emission is showing. By the way, you can also plug the color ramp into the color or strength of the emission. Just if you do either of these, choose the color by the color ramp, or if you plug the color ramp into the strength, use a math node and set it to multiply to control how powerful the strength really is. Personally, I'm actually going to have the color ramp plugged into the math node to control the strength that way, but there we have it. After you play around with it a little bit, there's the shading of the ring. Now for the 3D printing part. Start by duplicating the ring and making the material its own. Then you can add an emission and replace it with the displacement, except plug it into the surface instead of displacement. Then duplicate the image texture that we have, click new image, call it whatever you feel like. Then you can choose the resolution. I personally just search for 8K and copy the value 3420 and paste it into the height and width. And make sure 32-bit float is selected. Make sure the image texture is selected and go to render properties and find bake. Don't click bake until you actually set the bake type to emit. Seems how we are using an emission shader to actually bake this texture. Also, it would be smart to save it before baking because I have had Blender crash on me before in the past. So after it's done baking, go to UV editing and save the image to wherever you feel like it. Me personally, I'm going to save it in this ring folder and we'll use it in just a sec. We can add a displacement modifier. With it, we can hit new, then we can go to texture properties and open the image we just baked. You can see this doesn't do what we want, so we can go to the displacement modifier, change the direction to UV, and strength 2.1, and change subdivision to around 6 to 8 levels. You can also play around with the strength until you get the indent you want. I personally settled on a value of 0.025, but now we can export the file. Oh, by the way, I have 3D Print Toolbox add-on enabled, which comes with Blender by default, which is why I'm able to export it from the side menu. But once you have it exported, you can then use whatever slicer you want. Personally, I use Prusa Slicer, and just import the model you have, and you can see I didn't set scale or do anything about dimensions, so Prusa Slicer has issues, but you can just scale it up or down once imported. Also, there is tons of errors, which usually happens when faces are the wrong direction. You can check this by clicking Object Overlays and seeing if the faces are red or blue. In this case, they are red, so they are the wrong direction. So you can fix this by going into edit mode on the ring, selecting all the faces, and hitting Option N to recalculate normals. Also, because it is changing the orientation of the faces, you will have to change the strength of the displacement modifier to negative 0.25. Then export it again and you should be fine. A nice tip for an object like this, where the scale can vary depending on finger size, is to actually use Slicer's dimensions to change the size. Well, there we have it. That's basically it. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make
The One Ring.
in Blender. Well, anyway, I'll see you in the next video. Bye!